My name is Margaret Whitaker, and I was 72 years old when my daughter hid my mail for 6 months and sold the back 20 acres of my land while I was still living in the little white house my husband built for me in Cedar Grove, Missouri. She thought I was too old to notice. She thought if the envelopes never reached my hands, then the truth would never reach my heart. But one rainy Tuesday morning, Mr. Howard Bell, the postmaster who had known my family for 38 years, drove up my gravel driveway in his own pickup truck with one certified letter tucked inside a plastic sleeve. He stood on my porch, looked past my shoulder like he was afraid someone might be listening, and said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I believe somebody has been interfering with your mail." That one sentence is the reason I am telling this story now. Because 3 weeks after that, my daughter sat in a county meeting room beside the man who had bought my land, smiling like everything had already been settled. Then the postmaster placed that certified letter on the table. My lawyer opened the county file, and my daughter finally learned that quiet women are not always weak. Sometimes we are just waiting until the paper tells the truth for us. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where quiet people tell the truth without begging to be believed. This is where hidden papers, old letters, and patient hearts finally speak louder than lies. If you have ever been called confused when you were really being ignored, or dramatic when you were only trying to protect what was yours, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and whether you have ever had to protect your peace from your own family. I read those comments when the house feels too quiet. I was born in Cedar Grove and, except for 2 years right after I married, I never really left. Cedar Grove is not the kind of place that makes the news. It has one grocery store, one high school, 3 churches, a feed store, a diner with pie that tastes better on Sundays, and a post office with a flag that has seen more storms than most people. My husband, Ray, used to say our town was so small that if you sneezed at the hardware store, somebody at church would hand you cough drops the next morning. Ray died 4 years before all this happened. His heart gave out in his sleep one cold February night while I was in the kitchen making coffee. I still remember calling his name from the hallway and knowing, before I touched his shoulder, that the world had already changed. We had been married 49 years, not perfect years. Real years. Years with arguments over bills, sick children, broken washing machines, bad crops, and long stretches where we loved each other in the quiet way older couples do. He fixed things before I asked. I saved the last biscuit for him without thinking. He kept my car full of gas. I kept his Sunday shirts ironed. That was our love language. The land was his dream before it became mine. 32 acres just outside town, with a white farmhouse, a red barn that leaned a little to the left, 2 ponds, a row of walnut trees, and a narrow strip of pasture that turned gold every October. Ray bought the first 12 acres when he was 27. Then he bought 10 more from old Mr. Harlan after Harlan's knees got too bad to keep cattle. Then in our 50s, we bought the back 20 acres that ran along Miller Creek. That back land was not fancy. It had rocks, blackberry thorns, and one old logging path that washed out every spring. But Ray loved it. He said land did not have to be pretty to be worth keeping. It just had to remember your footsteps. When he died, people asked me if I planned to sell. I always said no, not because I needed all that space. I was one woman with bad knees, 2 cats, and a garden I could barely keep up with. But that land held my life. Ray taught our daughter, Kimberly, to ride a bicycle on the gravel lane. We buried 3 family dogs under the maple tree behind the barn. My grandchildren learned to catch frogs at the lower pond. Every Thanksgiving, the men would walk the property line after dinner, while the women pretended we were not grateful for the quiet. And there was one more thing. Ray made me promise not to sell the back 20 acres unless I truly wanted to. He said it a year before he died, sitting at our kitchen table with a stack of papers and his reading glasses halfway down his nose. "Maggie," he said, "this town is going to grow whether we like it or not. Developers have been sniffing around Miller Creek for years. Don't let anybody talk you out of that back piece, not unless you decide it yourself." I laughed then. I told him nobody was going to bully me into selling land. He looked at me for a long moment and said, Sometimes the people who pressure you are not strangers. I wish I had listened closer. Our daughter Kimberly was our only child. She was 48 when this happened. Pretty in the polished way some women become when they learn that looking put together can make people think their life is put together too. She wore soft sweaters, gold earrings, and perfume that entered a room before she did. She worked part-time at a dental office in Springfield and spent the rest of her time managing everyone else's business, whether they asked her to or not. I loved her. Let me say that clearly. I loved my daughter before she hurt me, and some part of me still loved her after. That is what makes family betrayal so hard. A stranger can steal from you, and you can hate them cleanly. But when your child does it, your heart keeps remembering their baby teeth. Kimberly had 2 children. My granddaughter Lacey was 21 and studying nursing at a community college. My grandson Ben was 16, quiet, and always looking at his phone unless he was helping me carry groceries. Kimberly's husband, Paul, sold insurance and believed every room improved when he explained something. After Ray died, Kimberly started coming by more often. At first, I thought it was kindness. She brought casseroles, helped me organize Ray's clothes, and sat with me during those early evenings when grief felt like a second person in the room. Then the helping changed. It happened slowly enough that I could make excuses for it. She stopped asking and started deciding. She moved my medicine cabinet around because she said, "Mom, this setup is not practical." She threw away old jars in the pantry because you can't keep everything forever. She paid 2 bills online for me and then said, "Honestly, it would be easier if I just handled all this." At the time, I told myself she was tired. She had a job, teenagers, a husband who talked too much, and a mother who cried when she found Ray's old pocket knife in a drawer. I thought maybe control was how she handled worry. But there were warning signs. The first was a Sunday dinner in March. Kimberly had invited herself, Paul, and the kids over after church. I made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the lemon cake my granddaughter loved. Everything felt normal until Paul looked out the kitchen window toward the back field and said, "You know, Maggie, land like that is just sitting there." I was rinsing a spoon. "Land is allowed to sit, Paul." He smiled like I had made a joke. "Sure, but taxes don't sit. Maintenance doesn't sit. Liability doesn't sit." Kimberly gave him a look. Quick and sharp, like he had stepped ahead of a plan. I noticed it. I just did not understand it yet. The second warning came 2 weeks later, when Kimberly asked where Ray kept old property stuff. I said, "What property stuff?" "Deeds, surveys, tax bills, things like that." "They are in the metal file box in the hall closet," she said. "You should let me put those in a safer place." "They are safe where they are." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Mom, you still keep spare keys in a butter dish." Your idea of safe is not always safe. It hurt, but I let it pass. Older mothers get used to swallowing little insults because we do not want lunch to become a fight. The third warning was my mail. I'd always getting the mail. Maybe that sounds silly, but after Ray died, walking to the mailbox gave my day a shape. I would take my cane, go down the porch steps, cross the short stretch of gravel, open the black mailbox, and bring back whatever the world had sent me. Bills, grocery flyers, seed catalogs, church bulletins, letters from my cousin in Arkansas, birthday cards, Medicare notices, little proof that I still existed in somebody's system. Then the mail started getting strange. Some days there was nothing, not even junk. At first, I thought the post office was slow. Then Kimberly said, "Mom, most things are online now. You don't need to worry about paper." But I did worry. I had always paid bills by check. I kept stamps in a blue teacup near the phone. Ray and I had trusted paper. Paper did not disappear when a password changed. One Wednesday, I asked Kimberly if she had seen my electric bill. She said, "I paid it." I said, "With what?" "Your account. I told you I'd help. I did not ask you to take over my bills." Her mouth tightened. "You asked me with your life, Mom. You just don't use those words." If you are a mother or grandmother watching this, you may understand why that sentence hurt more than the bill itself. There is a special kind of pain when someone uses your age like evidence against you. The fourth warning came from my neighbor. Ruth Ann lived half a mile down the road and had known me since our children were in kindergarten. She called one afternoon and said, "Maggie, did you put a forwarding order on your mail?" I was sitting at the kitchen table shelling peas. "What? I got a church newsletter today, and Shirley at the post office mentioned they had some address confusion for you. I thought you were still home." "I am still home." "Well, maybe I heard wrong." After we hung up, I called the post office. A young clerk answered. I asked if my mail had been forwarded. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice sounded careful. "Mom, I show a temporary mail hold and pickup authorization." "A what?" "Mail hold and pickup authorization. I did not authorize anybody to pick up my mail." There was a pause. "It lists Kimberly Whitaker Ellis, my daughter." I felt my hand tighten around the phone. The clerk said, "It may have been requested online. It says family assistance." Family assistance. That was what they called it when your daughter stepped between you and the outside world. I asked to speak to Mr. Bell, the postmaster, but he was out on route inspection. The clerk said he would call me back. He did not call that day. Before I could call again, Kimberly showed up with groceries. I asked her about the mail. She did not look surprised. That was the worst part. She placed a bag of oranges on the counter and said, "Mom, I was trying to simplify things. You had my mail held?" "Just some of it." "Some of my mail?" "Important things. Bills, statements. Things you get overwhelmed by." "I am not overwhelmed by envelopes." She sighed. "You say that, but you cried over a dental bill last month." "I cried because it was addressed to Ray." Her face changed for half a second. Something like guilt passed across it, but she pushed it away. "That is exactly what I mean. Paper upsets you." I stood there in my own kitchen, next to the sink where I had washed Kimberly's baby bottles, and I realized my daughter had decided sadness made me incompetent. I told her to cancel whatever she had done. She said she would. She did not. The fifth warning was the surveyor. In May, I saw two men in orange vests near the lower pasture. I was on the porch watering geraniums. They had tripods and flags. At first, I thought they were with the county checking drainage, because Miller Creek flooded every few years. I called down, "Can I help you?" One man lifted a hand. "Just marking corners, Mom." "For what?" He looked confused. "For the parcel split." My stomach dropped. "There is no parcel split," I said. He looked at his clipboard, then back at me. "You might want to talk to your representative." "My what?" He did not answer. The other man kept pushing a pink flag into the ground. I called Kimberly immediately. She answered on the third ring, breathless. "Mom, I'm at work. There are surveyors on my land." A pause. Then too quickly, "Oh, yes, that. What does that mean?" "It's nothing final. Paul just wanted some numbers. Paul does not own my land." "Nobody said he did." "Then why are men marking it?" She lowered her voice. "Mom, please don't go outside and make a scene. These people are professionals. Make a scene." That phrase would come back again and again. "Kimberly," I said, "you tell those men to leave my property. I'll handle it." "No, I will handle it." I walked down the driveway with my cane, my knees burning, and told the surveyors they needed to leave. They were polite. One apologized and said he had been told the owner knew. I asked who told him. He checked his clipboard. "Ellis Property Planning," he said. Paul had turned my life into a business name. When I told Kimberly later that I wanted all of it stopped, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and folded her hands like she was preparing to talk to a child. "Mom, this land is becoming too much for you. I do not farm the back 20. It is trees and creek." "Exactly. It serves no purpose. It serves my memory." She looked away. "Memories don't pay taxes," she said. "Before you decide what you would have done, wait until hear what my daughter did next." Because that conversation was not her asking permission. It was her warning me that, in her mind, permission no longer mattered. June came hot and wet. The grass grew fast. My knees got worse. Kimberly used that as proof. She started showing up with papers, not all at once. One page here, another there. "This just lets me talk to the insurance company. This is only for utilities. This is so I can ask questions at the bank without dragging you into town. This one is nothing, just routine." I had always been careful with signatures. Ray had taught me to read every page. But grief and pressure wear a person down. So does being told over and over that you are difficult. One afternoon, Kimberly brought a stack of forms while I was making tomato sandwiches. She had yellow sticky notes where I should sign. I said, I want to read them first. She laughed softly. Mom, it's not a mortgage. Then you won't mind waiting. She checked her watch. I have to pick up Ben in 20 minutes. Then leave them. Her voice changed. Why do you always make help feel like an attack? I remember the knife in my hand, mayonnaise on the blade, sunlight on the counter, and my daughter looking at me like I had disappointed her by still having a backbone. I signed 2 pages that day. I still regret it. One was a limited authorization for utilities. The other, I believed, allowed Kimberly to speak with my property insurance company. I did not sign a power of attorney. I did not sign a deed. I did not sign permission to sell anything, but later, when my lawyer showed me the recorded documents, there was my name. Or something pretending to be my name. The letters were shaky in a way that looked old on purpose. The M in Margaret was wrong. Ray used to tease me because I made my capital M with a little loop. That fake signature did not have it. But I am getting ahead of myself. In July, my mail nearly stopped completely. No bank statements. No county notices. No insurance papers. No property tax updates. Even my seed catalog stopped coming. When I questioned Kimberly, she said, Mom, you told me to handle the stressful things. I never told you to hide them. I am not hiding anything. I'm filtering. Filtering. That word made me feel like something dirty being kept from a clean house. By August, my land had been sold. I did not know it yet. That is the part that still wakes me sometimes. People were walking through my woods, signing checks, recording documents, planning a small housing development called Creekside Meadows. And I was sitting at my kitchen table clipping coupons. The betrayal became clear on a Thursday. It was the kind of August day when the air feels like a damp towel. I had gone into town with Ruth Ann to buy cat food and pick up my prescription. When we came back, there was a white truck parked near my barn. 2 men were unloading wooden stakes. A third man in a blue polo shirt stood with Paul near the pasture gate. Paul saw my car and straightened. He said something to the man beside him. Then he walked toward me smiling. That smile told me more than anger would have. Maggie, he called. I was going to call you. I got out slowly. Why are these men here? He looked at Ruth Ann, then back at me. Maybe we should talk inside. No, we can talk right here. The man in the blue shirt came over. He was around 50, tan, with a silver watch and a folder tucked under his arm. Mrs. Whitaker, he said. I'm Dennis Caro with Caro Development. Beautiful property. I did not shake his hand. What are you doing on it? His expression flickered. I'm sorry. I understood you were aware of the sale. My ears began to ring. The what? Paul stepped in. Maggie, don't get upset. Ruth Ann said, Paul. He ignored her. The back acreage has been sold, he said. It is done. Kimberly was going to explain everything once the paperwork settled. I looked toward the field where Ray had planted the walnut trees. A man was hammering a stake into the ground. I said, get off my land. Dennis Caro opened his folder. Mom, I have a recorded warranty deed. I still remember how official those words sounded. Recorded warranty deed, like a judge had already spoken. Like my grief, my promise to Ray, my 49 years of marriage, and my hand on every fence rail meant nothing beside a stamp from the county. Paul's voice softened in that fake gentle way. Maggie, this is why Kimberly didn't want you blindsided. You react emotionally. Where's my daughter? At home. She's upset too. She sold my land and she is upset? He leaned closer. Your land was becoming a burden. This is going to help everyone. Everyone? Well, yes. You, especially. The money will help with future care. Future care. There it was. Not my life, not my choice, not my home, my future care. That phrase is what people use when they want to make taking control sound like kindness. I asked how much. Paul glanced at Dennis. Dennis said, the purchase price was $240,000. My breath caught, not because it was a lot, because it was far too little. That back 20 acres along Miller Creek was worth nearly twice that, maybe more with road access. Ray had known, I had known. Any person in town who read the paper knew developers were paying high for land near the new bypass. I said, where is the money? Paul looked uncomfortable. Kimberly is managing the account, he said. Something in me went very still. Ruth Ann touched my elbow. Maggie, come inside. I did not move. I looked at Paul and said, show me where I signed. He held up both palms. This is not the place. It is exactly the place. Dennis Caro opened the folder and pulled out a copy. He seemed less confident now. Maybe he realized he had walked into something more personal than a land deal. He handed me the page. There, near the bottom, was my name, Margaret L. Whitaker, signed in blue ink, not by me. My knees weakened, but I did not fall. Ruth Ann held my arm. I stared at that signature until the paper blurred. Paul said, you may not remember signing. That happens sometimes. I looked up at him. The insult landed harder than the theft. You are saying I forgot selling my husband's land? He swallowed. I'm saying the last year has been difficult. I folded the paper once and held it against my chest. Leave, I said. Dennis Caro nodded quickly. We'll pause work until this is clarified. Paul turned red. Dennis, that's unnecessary. No, Dennis said. It is very necessary. That was the first small mercy. A stranger knew to stop before my own family did. That evening, Kimberly came over. Not alone. She brought Paul. They walked in without knocking because she still had a key. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the fake deed copy in front of me, Ray's framed photo beside it. Ruth Ann had stayed. She sat near the stove with her purse in her lap, like she was ready to call somebody. Kimberly looked tired, but not sorry. Mom, she said, you scared those men today. I almost laughed. I scared them? You can't accuse people of things just because you don't like a decision. A decision I did not make. Her lips pressed together. You signed the paperwork. No, I did not, Mom. Say it plainly, Kimberly. Say you believe I signed away Ray's land and forgot. Her eyes flickered to Paul. He took over. Maggie, memory issues can be subtle. Ruth Ann stood, careful. Paul held up a hand. I'm not being cruel, I'm being realistic. We have all noticed changes. What changes? I asked. Kimberly's voice grew soft. You repeat stories, you lose bills, you get confused by appointments. You hid my mail. She looked away. I helped organize it. You kept it from me. Because every envelope turned into a crisis. I touched Ray's photo, not even realizing I was doing it. You sold land your father told me to keep. Her face tightened. Dad is gone, she said. The words were true. That made them worse. She continued, and he left me to deal with you. The kitchen seemed smaller after that, Ruth Ann whispered, Kimberly. But my daughter kept going. Maybe she had held it in for years. Maybe greed loosens old resentment. Maybe she had convinced herself she was the injured one. You have no idea what it is like, she said. Every week something. A bill, a doctor visit, a repair, a memory, a crying spell. I have my own family, Mom. I cannot keep organizing my life around a house full of ghosts and land you can't even walk. I looked at her and saw, for a second, the little girl who used to run through that same kitchen with bare feet and pigtails. Then she said, you should be grateful we found a way to use it before it became worthless. That was when something inside me changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was like a door closing with a soft click. I said, I want my house key back. She blinked. What? My key? Mom, don't be ridiculous. I held out my hand. Paul said, this is exactly what we mean. You are escalating. I kept my hand out. Kimberly stared at me for a long moment. Then she dug into her purse, pulled my key off her ring, and dropped it on the table. It hit the wood beside Ray's picture. She said, fine. But do not call me when you need help. Then she walked out. Mothers remember the first time their child lets go of their hand. We also remember the last. That night, I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until the house sounds changed from evening creaks to midnight quiet. The cats curled under Ray's chair. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the field was dark except for the porch light reaching the first few feet of gravel. I kept looking at that fake signature. I wanted to cry, but my body felt past tears. So I made coffee at 2:17 in the morning. Even though my doctor said caffeine afternoon was foolish, and I pulled out the metal file box from the hall closet. Inside were old tax bills, insurance papers, Ray's death certificate, our marriage license, a few savings bonds, and the original deed to the whole property from when we bought the last 20 acres. The deed was still there, but the survey map was missing. So was the letter from Ray's old lawyer about keeping the back acreage in my name. So was a sealed envelope Ray had labeled in his handwriting, "Property notes for Maggie." I sat back on my heels in the hallway and felt the cold go through me. Kimberly had not just hidden mail, she had been in my files. I do not know how long I sat there before Ruth Ann called. She had not slept much either. "Are you all right?" she asked. "No, I'm coming over after breakfast." "Bring your reading glasses," I said. By 9 that morning, we had papers spread across the kitchen table. Ruth Ann made a list while I searched every folder twice. We found old tax bills showing the acreage. We found copies of checks Ray had written. We found a letter from 2016 when a developer had made an offer and Ray had refused. But we did not find the missing survey map or his property notes. Ruth Ann said, "You need a lawyer." "I know. Not Kimberly's. Not Paul's friend. Your own." Ray's old lawyer, Mr. Carver, had retired. His son, Daniel Carver, still ran the small law office downtown above the pharmacy. I had known Daniel when he wore braces. I called and asked for an appointment. The receptionist said he was booked for 2 weeks. I said, "Tell him it is about Ray Whitaker's land." Daniel called me back in 11 minutes. He saw me that afternoon. His office smelled like paper, lemon polish, and old carpet. He had Ray's file pulled before I arrived. He was in his early 50s, with gray at his temples and the same serious eyes his father had. I handed him the deed copy Dennis Caro had given me. He read it without speaking. Then he looked at me and said, "Did you sign this?" "No." "Did you sign any power of attorney giving Kimberly authority to sell?" "No." "Any trust amendment, any transfer document, any limited agency agreement?" "No." He leaned back. "Mrs. Whitaker, this was recorded with the county 6 weeks ago." I gripped my purse strap. "Can we undo it?" "We can challenge it. We can file a notice. We can contact the title company. We can ask for the notary records. But I need to see everything." Then he said something that made me feel both better and worse. "This kind of thing usually leaves a trail." A trail. I thought of my missing mail, the held envelopes, the stopped statements, the surveyors, the missing map, the fake signature. My daughter had left a trail all over my life. Daniel asked, "Have you received any certified mail related to this sale?" "No." "Any notice from the title company?" "No." "NC notice from the county recorder?" "No." "Any tax reassessment letter?" "No." His pen stopped moving. "You should have." I thought of Mr. Bell, the postmaster, not returning my earlier call. I thought of the clerk saying there had been a mail hold and pickup authorization. I told Daniel. His face grew very still. "Mail interference is serious," he said, "but we need documentation." I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Documentation is exactly what she kept from me. Daniel did not smile. "Then we find it another way. Do not leave yet, because the person who helped me most was not a lawyer, not a judge, and not even my neighbor. It was a man most people in town barely noticed unless their package was late. 2 days later, Mr. Howard Bell came to my door. It was raining, not a hard storm. Just steady gray rain that made the porch boards dark, and the hanging fern drip. I had been folding towels in the living room when I heard tires on the gravel. Howard Bell was 64, tall and thin, with a gray mustache and a habit of removing his hat whenever he spoke to a woman over 60. He had worked at the Cedar Grove post office since before Kimberly was born. Ray used to bring him tomatoes from the garden. He stood on my porch, holding a plastic sleeve. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "may I come in for a minute?" I stepped aside. He wiped his shoes twice, though there was hardly any mud, and followed me to the kitchen. He did not sit until I asked him. Then he placed the plastic sleeve on the table. Inside was a certified letter. The green card was still attached. My name was printed on the front. Margaret L. Whitaker, my address, my house. The return address was from Mid-Missouri Title and Escrow. Howard folded his hands. "This was found in a misrouted hold bin during an audit yesterday." "A hold bin?" "Yes, Mom. Why was my certified letter in a hold bin?" He looked uncomfortable. "That is what I came to discuss." He explained it slowly, and I appreciated that. Not because I could not understand fast words, but because slow words gave me time to breathe. 6 months earlier, someone had submitted an online request to hold my mail for pickup. The request used my name, my address, my phone number, and an email address I did not recognize. It authorized Kimberly Ellis to pick up accumulated mail and assist elderly parent with document management. Howard said normally, for a long-term hold or repeated pickup, staff should confirm identification and check with the resident if anything seemed unusual. But the request had been marked temporary at first, then extended, then certain items had been signed out. Certain items? I asked. He pulled a folded copy from his coat pocket. These are the internal pickup logs I am allowed to show you informally. I have already started a formal review. There was Kimberly's name, dates, initials, batch numbers, my bank statement, my county tax notice, 2 letters from the title company, 1 certified notice from Mid-Missouri Title and Escrow, and then this one. The letter in front of me had never been signed out. It had been placed in the wrong bin and stayed there, forgotten, misplaced, saved, maybe, by the same kind of ordinary mistake that had helped Kimberly hide the others. Howard tapped the plastic sleeve. This certified letter required your personal signature. It should not have been held for third-party pickup without stricter verification. When I saw your name, I remembered you had called months back. I asked, why didn't anyone call me? His face reddened. That failure is on us. And I am sorry. Those words almost broke me. Not because he was responsible for Kimberly's betrayal, but because he was the first person in months to look me in the eye and say something wrong had happened without blaming my age. I said, what is in the letter? I don't know. It is sealed. My hands shook when I opened it. The envelope tore unevenly. Inside was a formal notice from Mid-Missouri Title and Escrow dated 6 weeks before the sale closed. It said the title company had received documents authorizing the sale of approximately 20 acres of my property to Caro Development LLC. It said that because the seller was represented through limited power of attorney paperwork, and because the seller's mailing address matched the property being sold, they were required to send direct certified notice to me before closing. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If you did not authorize this transaction, or if you have questions regarding the enclosed seller acknowledgement, contact our office immediately before the scheduled closing date of July 18. The closing had happened July 18. I received the letter in September. I read that sentence 3 times. Howard sat quietly. Ruth Ann, who had come over that morning, covered her mouth. Daniel Carver had told me these things leave a trail. Now, one piece of that trail sat on my kitchen table, damp at the corner from the rain on Howard Bell's sleeve. I looked at Howard and asked, can you prove Kimberly picked up my other mail? He nodded slowly. I can prove what our logs show. I can also write a statement about this certified letter and the hold request irregularities. And Mrs. Whitaker, he hesitated. What? There is one more thing. My heart had already taken so much that day I did not think it could jump again, but it did. He said the online hold request used an email address, bellisplanning@gmail.com. B. Ellis. Ben? No. Paul's full name was Paul Benjamin Ellis, Ellis Planning, the same name on the surveyor's clipboard. Paul had helped create the mail hold. Kimberly had picked up the mail. My daughter and son-in-law had built a wall between me and the truth, one envelope at a time. If you are watching from Florida, Texas, Ohio, Georgia, Pennsylvania, California, or anywhere across America, tell me where you are watching from. And tell me this, have you ever had someone do something wrong, then act offended because you noticed? Because that is what happened next. When Daniel Carver called Mid-Missouri Title, things started moving quickly, not movie quickly. Real life is slower and more frustrating. People need forms. Departments need time. Clerks are out to lunch. Managers say they will call back and do not. But the difference was, now I had proof. Daniel filed a notice of disputed conveyance with the county recorder. He sent letters to the title company, Caro Development, Kimberly Paul, and the notary listed on the deed. He requested the closing packet. He requested the notary journal. He requested copies of identification used. He requested the power of attorney document that supposedly gave Kimberly authority. Then he told me something important. Do not call Kimberly about this. I wasn't planning to. Do not warn her. I understand. Do not argue by text. I looked at him. Daniel, I still have a flip phone. For the first time, he almost smiled. Good. But Kimberly called me. Of course she did. 3 days after the certified letter came, my phone rang at 8:42 p.m. I remember because I had just made chamomile tea. Her name showed on the little screen. I let it ring 4 times, then I answered. Hello. Her voice was tight. Mom, what are you doing? Sitting at my kitchen table. You know what I mean. No, Kimberly, I don't anymore. She breathed hard. Paul got a letter from a lawyer today. So did you, I imagine. Why would you do this? I looked at Ray's photo on the shelf by the stove. Why would I question the sale of land I did not sell? You did sell it. No, Mom, you signed documents. Just because you regret it now does not mean everyone else committed some crime. There it was, the news story. Regret, not theft, not forgery, not hidden mail. Regret, I said, that signature is not mine. Her voice rose. You don't remember half of what you sign. I remember my own name. You are making this ugly. I sat very straight. You made it ugly when you hid my mail. Silence. Not long, but long enough. Then she said, I was protecting you. From a certified letter, you were not in a state to handle stress. For 6 months? You don't understand what you put me through. That sentence has a sharp little hook in it. People use it when they want their burden to erase their behavior, I said. Kimberly, I am going to tell you one thing. Do not come to my house without calling first. She laughed once, coldly. Your house? I closed my eyes. My house, I said. Don't be so sure. Then she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, not because I was afraid of losing the house. The house had not been sold. Not yet. But those 3 words, don't be so sure, told me she had thought about more than the back 20 acres. That night, I carried the metal file box into my bedroom and put it under my bed like I was 20 years old hiding love letters. The next morning, I called a locksmith. His name was Andre. He was young, polite, and asked no questions until he saw me watching him change the back door lock. Family trouble, he asked gently. I said, a little. He nodded. I change more locks for family trouble than burglaries. That stayed with me. Sometimes the danger has a key because you gave it one. Daniel received the closing packet 9 days later. He called and asked me to come in. Ruth Ann drove me. I wore my navy dress, the one I usually saved for church meetings, and Ray's wedding ring on a chain under my collar. My own ring had gotten loose after I lost weight, so I kept his close to my heart. Daniel had a folder open on his desk. I want to prepare you, he said. Some of this may be upsetting. I've been upset for months. He nodded and turned the first page. The closing packet included a limited power of attorney dated June 14. It claimed I had appointed Kimberly Ellis as my agent for the sale of the back 20 acres. It included my forged signature. The notary was a woman named Vanessa Pike. I did not know her. The witness signature belonged to Paul. The identification copy attached was my driver's license. That made no sense until I remembered Kimberly taking my purse one afternoon. She had said she needed my insurance card to call the clinic. My driver's license had been in the same wallet pocket. A copy of it was now in a land sale file. Daniel turned another page. There was a seller acknowledgement form. My initials appeared in 3 places. Not my initials. There was a mailing address confirmation. There was a statement saying I had received and reviewed the purchase contract. I had not. There was a disbursement sheet showing the sale money had been wired to an account at Ozark Heritage Bank, not my regular checking account. A new account, opened in my name with Kimberly listed as authorized signer. My mouth went dry. Daniel slid a page toward me. Do you recognize this account? No. Did you open it? No. Have you received any of this money? No. Ruth Ann muttered something under her breath that I will not repeat. Then Daniel showed me the worst page, a handwritten note attached to the file. It said, seller elderly and prefers all communication through daughter. Daughter states seller becomes confused and anxious with repeated calls. Use where possible. Seller elderly, that was me, reduced to a warning label. I did not cry in Daniel's office. I wanted to. My throat burned. My hands shook so badly Ruth Ann reached over and held them. But I did not cry, Daniel said. Mrs. Whitaker, this is no longer just a civil property dispute. There may be forgery, financial exploitation, and mail interference. I looked at him. What happens now? We bring in the right people. The sheriff? Yes. and the bank, and likely adult protective services, though I know that may feel uncomfortable. I am not helpless. I know, he said. That is not what this means. It means the state has procedures when someone may have exploited an older adult. Older adult. There was a time when those words would have embarrassed me. Not anymore. If being older meant there were laws that said my daughter could not steal my land and call it care, then I would be older on paper all day long. The sheriff's deputy came to my house 2 days later. Deputy Marcia Collins was in her 50s, with short brown hair and a calm face. I liked her immediately because she did not speak to me like I was made of glass. She sat at my kitchen table with Daniel, Howard Bell, Ruth Ann, and me. Howard brought copies of the mail hold logs in an official envelope. Daniel brought the closing packet. I brought my old file box and every piece of my own signature I could find: checks, birthday cards, tax forms, even the note I had written to Ray on our 40th anniversary. Deputy Collins looked at the fake signature and then at a birthday card I had signed to Lacey. She said, "That M is not the same." "No," I said. "It is not." Howard explained the mail hold request. He explained Kimberly's pickups. He explained the certified letter found in the wrong bin. Deputy Collins asked, "Mrs. Whitaker, did you authorize Kimberly Ellis to pick up your mail?" "No." "Did you authorize Paul Ellis to submit a hold request?" "No." "Did you authorize the sale of your property?" "No." "Did you sign this power of attorney?" "No." She wrote each answer down. Not once did she ask me if I was sure in that soft, doubting tone I had started to hate. When she finished, she closed her notebook and said, "We will investigate." That sounds simple. It did not feel simple. It felt like standing at the edge of a bridge and realizing there was no way back to who I had been before. Because once you involve the sheriff, you cannot pretend it is just a family misunderstanding. You cannot tell yourself your daughter got carried away. You cannot keep the peace by letting your own life be stolen. Tell me in the comments if you have ever had to choose between keeping peace in the family and telling the truth. Because people act like peace is always holy, but sometimes what they call peace is just silence with a pretty name. While the investigation began, Kimberly tried everything except accountability. First came anger. She left me a voicemail saying, "I cannot believe you are doing this to your own daughter." Then came pity. She texted Ruth Ann, not me, saying she was worried about my mental state and did not know who was influencing me. Then came community performance. She told women at church that I was struggling and that she and Paul had made hard decisions for my safety. That one nearly worked. Older women know how church whispers travel. They wear perfume and carry casseroles. The Sunday after Kimberly started talking, 3 different ladies touched my arm and asked how I was really doing. One said, "It must be hard when children have to step in." I went home early. I sat in my car in the driveway and cried where nobody could see me. Not because I believed them, because I realized Kimberly was trying to bury me while I was still breathing. The next day, I went to the church office and asked Pastor Glenn for 10 minutes. He was a kind man, but kindness can be timid when families get messy. I sat across from him and said, "Pastor, I am not asking you to take sides. But if anyone tells you I am confused and my daughter is protecting me, I want you to know there is an active sheriff's investigation into forged land documents." His face changed. I placed Daniel's letter on his desk. "Do not spread it," I said. "Just do not help bury me." He nodded slowly. "Maggie, I am sorry. I believed him." 2 Sundays later, he preached about truth without naming names. Kimberly sat 3 rows ahead of me and never turned around. Lacey did turn around. My granddaughter had been distant for months. Not rude, just careful. Kimberly had kept her away from me by saying I was tired, emotional, not up for visitors. Lacey had sent texts, and sometimes I answered, sometimes I did not see them, because Kimberly had helpfully muted notifications on my phone. Another little thing I had not understood. After church, that Sunday, Lacey waited beside my car. She looked like Kimberly did at 21, but softer. Brown hair in a ponytail, tired eyes from nursing classes, a little crease between her brows when she was worried. "Grandma," she said. I opened my arms. She stepped into them and started crying, not polite tears. "Real ones, I didn't know," she whispered. I held her tight. "I know, Mom said you didn't want visitors. She said you were mad at everyone. No, baby. She said you signed the land over and then changed your mind. No. Lacey pulled back and wiped her face. I saw something. Those 4 words made the air feel charged. What did you see? She looked toward the church doors, where Kimberly was talking to 2 women with her calm church face on. Not here, Lacey said. That afternoon Lacey came to my house. She brought a laptop and a fear I recognized. The fear of a good person who has learned something bad about someone they love. We sat at the kitchen table. Ruth Ann came too, because by then I did not like being alone with new information. Lacey opened the laptop. I wasn't snooping, she said quickly. I was using Dad's old printer because mine broke. His emails was open on the desktop. I saw your name. She clicked a folder of screenshots. There were emails between Paul and Dennis Caro. Most were ordinary deal emails, survey timing, closing date, access road, purchase price. Then we saw one from Paul to Dennis, dated May 29 subject. Communication with seller. Paul wrote, "Please avoid direct calls to Margaret. She becomes agitated and may not recall prior conversations. Kimberly is authorized to handle documents. We need to keep this moving before she changes her mind again. Before she changes her mind again." A lie built into a sentence. Another email from Dennis said, "We still need direct certified notice due to seller not attending closing." Paul replied, "Send it to the house. We control mail pickup. We control mail pickup." Lacey covered her mouth. I took screenshots because I didn't know what else to do. Ruth Ann said, "Honey, you did exactly right." I stared at that line until my eyes hurt. We control mail pickup. There are moments when betrayal becomes so clear that it almost stops hurting. For a few minutes, it turns into evidence. Your heart steps aside and lets your mind work. I called Daniel. He told me to send the screenshots. Not to forward anything from Paul's account if Lacey was not authorized, and not to let Lacey put herself at risk. But the screenshots showed enough to guide requests. Daniel could subpoena or formally request records if needed. He was careful. I appreciated careful. Lacey stayed for dinner that night. I made grilled cheese and tomato soup because it was what I used to make her when she was little. She sat in Ray's chair and told me she had been arguing with her mother for weeks. "Mom keeps saying you're being manipulated by Mr. Carver," she said. I smiled a little. Daniel Carver used to eat paste in Sunday school. Lacey laughed through her tears, then she grew quiet. "Grandma, did Mom really do this for money?" I looked out the window toward the dark line of trees. "I think she did it for control first. The money made it easier to justify." Lacey nodded. "Dad has debt," she said. I turned back to her. "How do you know?" I heard them fighting. "Credit cards. Business loans. Something about a failed investment. Mom kept saying the land would fix everything. The land would fix everything. My land, raise trees. My future there fix." That night after Lacey left, I walked to the porch and stood in the dark. The air smelled like cut grass and rain. Somewhere near the pond, frogs called to each other. I thought of Ray walking the property line, one hand in his pocket, cap low over his forehead. "I am trying," I whispered. "I do not know if the dead hear us. But sometimes talking to them helps us hear ourselves." The quiet preparation lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of copies, statements, phone calls, and waiting. Daniel had me sign affidavits. Deputy Collins interviewed Howard, Ruth Ann, Lacey, the surveyors, and eventually Dennis Caro. The title company admitted their procedures had not been followed carefully because Kimberly and Paul had presented themselves as family helpers with proper paperwork. The notary, Vanessa Pike, became very hard to reach. The bank froze the new account after Daniel sent notice of suspected fraud. By then, some of the money was gone. Not all, enough to hurt. Kimberly had used part of it to pay off Paul's business debt. Part went to credit cards. Part went to a deposit on a condo in Branson. When Daniel told me, I was sitting in his office looking at the courthouse clock through the window. "A condo?" I said. "I'm sorry." I thought of Kimberly standing in my kitchen saying, "The money would help with my future care." My future care had a lake view. The sheriff's department did not arrest anyone right away. That is not how these things always happen. They gathered records, they interviewed, they built. Daniel warned me that legal justice could be slow and imperfect. But there was one faster problem. Caro Development had scheduled a county planning meeting to approve preliminary road access for Creekside Meadows. Even though the sale was disputed, Dennis Caro had not fully withdrawn the application. His lawyer claimed his company had purchased in good faith and should not be punished for family confusion. Family confusion. That phrase made Daniel remove his glasses and rub his eyes. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker, the planning meeting is public." I understood before he finished. Kimberly and Paul would be there. Dennis Caro would be there. County officials would be there. The land sale would be discussed as if it were real unless we put the dispute clearly on record. Daniel said, "You do not have to attend. I can speak for you. I thought about it. I was tired in the bones. Tired of being watched at church. Tired of sleeping with a chair under the back doorknob even though the locks had been changed. Tired of waking at 4 a.m., wondering how much of my life my daughter had been willing to sign away. But then I thought of that line in Paul's email. We control mail pickup. No, they had controlled enough. I'll be there, I said. The meeting was on a Thursday evening in late September at the County Administration Building. A plain brick place with fluorescent lights, beige walls, and folding chairs that made everyone look uncomfortable. Ruth Ann drove me. Lacey came separately because she did not want Kimberly to know she was helping me until she walked in. Daniel was there in a dark suit. Howard Bell came too, carrying a folder under his arm. He was not required to attend, but he said, "I think I should." Deputy Collins stood near the back wall, not in a dramatic way, just present. Kimberly and Paul arrived 10 minutes before the meeting started. Kimberly wore a cream blouse and pearls. She always dressed nicest when she was preparing to lie. Paul wore a navy jacket and the expression of a man who believed confidence could become fact if he held it long enough. They saw me. Kimberly's face went pale, then hard. She walked over, heels clicking on the tile. "Mom," she said quietly, "this is unnecessary." I looked at her. I agree. That confused her. She leaned closer. "You are embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "You are about to understand the difference." Paul joined her. "Maggie, your lawyer is making this worse. We can still settle this privately." Daniel stepped beside me. "Mr. Ellis, do not speak to my client directly about the disputed transaction." Paul smiled, like Daniel was a child. "This is a family matter." Howard Bell, standing behind me, said in his slow postmaster voice, "It stopped being only that when the mail was used." Paul's smile disappeared. Kimberly's eyes went to Howard's folder. For the first time, I saw fear, not regret, fear. Remember that, because some people are only sorry when they see the evidence. The meeting began with road maintenance, a zoning variance for a storage shed, and a complaint about drainage behind the Dollar General. Ordinary life kept walking past my disaster like it always does. Then they called Creekside Meadows. Dennis Caro stood first. He looked less polished than before. His lawyer spoke about preliminary plans, economic benefit, and housing needs. Then the county planning chair, a woman named Maribel Stanton, said, "We have received notice of a dispute regarding the ownership and transfer of the subject property. Counsel for Mrs. Whitaker is present." Daniel stood. He did not shout. He did not perform. He simply carried a folder to the front table. "My client, Margaret Whitaker, contests the validity of the deed underlying this application," he said. "We have evidence indicating her signature was forged, her mail was withheld, and required certified notice was not delivered to her prior to closing." A murmur moved through the room. Kimberly looked straight ahead. Paul whispered something to her. Daniel placed copies on the table. The transaction relied on a limited power of attorney. Mrs. Whitaker denies signing. We have provided comparison signatures, a postal irregularity statement, bank records, and a certified letter that was never delivered to her until after closing. Maribel Stanton turned to me. "Mrs. Whitaker, would you like to speak?" My legs felt weak when I stood. Lacey slipped into the room just then and stood near the back beside Deputy Collins. She gave me the smallest nod. I walked to the front with my cane. The room was not huge, maybe 40 people. But it felt like a courthouse, church, and funeral all at once. My daughter sat in the second row, hands clasped tight in her lap. I placed one hand on the table. "My name is Margaret Whitaker," I said. I am 72 years old. I live at 418 Miller Creek Road. My husband, Ray, and I bought that land over many years. I did not agree to sell the back 20 acres. I did not sign to power of attorney. I did not attend a closing. I did not receive the certified notice that would have warned me before the sale. I looked at Kimberly. My daughter picked up my mail without my permission. She stood suddenly. That is not fair. Maribel tapped her gavel. Mrs. Ellis, you will have a chance to respond. Kimberly sat, breathing hard. I continued. For months, I was told I was confused. I was told papers upset me. I was told the land was too much for me. But the truth is simple. The mail that could have protected me was kept from me. My voice shook then. I hated that it shook, but I kept going. The certified letter came too late because it was held away from me. Mr. Bell brought it to my house himself. That letter is why I know the title company tried to warn me. Howard stepped forward when Daniel called him. He took off his hat before speaking, though we were indoors. He explained the mail hold, the pickup authorization, the logs, the certified letter found in the hold bin, the email address connected to Paul's planning name. He did not make accusations beyond what he knew. That made his words stronger. Maribel asked, Mr. Bell, are you stating Mrs. Whitaker did not personally sign for this certified letter prior to closing? Yes, Mom, she did not. Was it delivered to her before closing? No, Mom. Was mail in her name picked up by Kimberly Ellis? Yes, Mom. According to our logs. Kimberly stood again. Because I was helping my mother. Daniel turned a page, then he said the sentence that shifted the whole room. Mrs. Ellis, if you were helping, why did your husband write to the developer, "We control mail pickup"? The room changed. You could feel it, not silence exactly. More like everyone inhaled but forgot to exhale. Paul's head snapped toward Daniel. Kimberly whispered. What? Daniel held up a printed email. May 29, from Paul Ellis to Dennis Caro. In reference to the required certified notice, send it to the house. We control mail pickup. Dennis Caro closed his eyes. His lawyer leaned toward him sharply. Paul stood. That email is taken out of context. Daniel said, then please provide the context. Paul opened his mouth, nothing came out. Lacey stepped forward. Kimberly saw her then. Lacey, she said, and her voice cracked. My granddaughter's face was pale but steady. I saw the email, Mom, she said. I saw more than one. Kimberly looked like she might faint, not because she had hurt me. Because her daughter had seen her clearly. If you are a mother watching this, you know there are few things more painful than a child seeing the truth you tried to hide. But sometimes the truth has to be seen before anything can heal. Maribel Stanton called for order. Daniel then opened the certified letter. He did not read every word, just the part that mattered. If you did not authorize this transaction, or if you have questions regarding the enclosed seller acknowledgement, contact our office immediately before the scheduled closing date of July 18. He placed it on the table. This letter was intended to protect Mrs. Whitaker before her land was sold. It did not reach her because of the mail arrangement set up and used by her daughter and son-in-law. Kimberly began crying. I had seen her cry many times. As a baby, as a teenager, as a bride, as a young mother. These tears were different. They were angry tears, cornered tears. She said, I was doing what Dad would have wanted. That was the only time I almost lost my temper. I turned to her. No, I said. Do not put your father's name on this. She flinched. Your father told me not to let anyone pressure me into selling that land. He said sometimes the people who pressure you are not strangers. Kimberly shook her head. We needed help. You could have asked. You would have said no. Yes, I said. I would have. The room stayed still. That is why you stole the choice. Paul said, no one stole anything. The money went to family needs. Deputy Collins moved slightly from the back wall. Daniel looked at Paul. Money from the sale was wired into an account opened in Mrs. Whitaker's name, then used to pay debts not belonging to Mrs. Whitaker. That matter is being investigated. Paul sat down. That was the moment I knew his confidence was gone. Not because he apologized, because he became quiet. Maribel Stanton conferred with the other board members. Dennis Caro's lawyer requested a continuance. Daniel requested that the application be tabled indefinitely pending resolution of title validity and investigation. The board voted to table. No road approval, no development plan, no public blessing over a stolen sale. It was not the full legal ending, but it was the first public truth. As people began to stand and talk, Kimberly came toward me. For one strange second, I thought she might say she was sorry. Instead, she whispered, "You turned my daughter against me." I looked at Lacey across the room. She was crying silently beside Ruth Ann. "No," I said. "You showed her who you were. I just stopped helping you hide it." Kimberly's face hardened. "You will regret this." Maybe she meant legally. Maybe she meant emotionally. Maybe she meant she would never forgive me. But I had already survived the worst thing she could do. She had made me feel disposable. After that, her anger was just weather. The legal aftermath took months. I wish I could tell you everything was fixed by the next morning, but that would not be true. Justice in real life has paperwork, delays, and people who say, pending until you want to scream. But the public reveal changed everything. Caro Development withdrew its application and eventually sued to unwind the purchase. The title company's insurer got involved. The deed was challenged, and after handwriting review, notary investigation, and bank records, the sale was declared invalid. The land came back under my clear title. The money that remained in the frozen account was returned through legal channels. The money already spent became part of a separate case. Kimberly and Paul faced charges related to forgery, financial exploitation, and mail issues. I will not pretend I enjoyed that. There is no happiness in seeing your child sit in a courtroom. Even when they deserve consequences, your body remembers holding them through ear infections. Paul tried to blame Kimberly. Kimberly tried to blame Paul. That, too, told me something. People who steal together do not always stand together when the bill arrives. Vanessa Pike, the notary, admitted she had notarized the document without me present as a favor to Kimberly, who had told her I was homebound and embarrassed about shaking hands. Vanessa lost her commission and faced her own consequences. Dennis Caro claimed he did not know the sale was fraudulent. Maybe he did not know all of it. Maybe he chose not to ask enough questions because profit can make people polite to lies. His company walked away from the land. The back 20 acres stayed trees, creek, rocks, blackberries, and memory. I had the locks changed again. I moved my important papers to a safe deposit box at a different bank. Lacey drove me. We put Ray's property notes there too. After they were found. That is another small story. Months later, Paul's sister called Daniel's office. She said Kimberly had left a cardboard file box in her garage before everything fell apart. Inside were old papers taken from my house. The missing survey map was there. So was Ray's envelope. Daniel brought it to me sealed in a larger envelope. The original flap had been opened, but Ray's handwriting was still on the front, preparatory notes for Maggie. I waited until I was alone to read it. Inside were copies of land records, notes about prior offers, and a letter Ray had written to me. It was dated 8 months before he died. Maggie, if you are reading this, I am probably gone or too sick to explain things right. Keep the Miller Creek piece unless selling it gives you peace. Do not sell because someone says you are old. Do not sell because Kimberly cries. Do not sell because Paul talks numbers. That land is not just money. It is time. It is choice. It is the place we became ourselves. If you ever do decide to sell, make sure Daniel Carver or his father looks at every page. And remember, you do not owe anybody your roof, your land, or your savings just because they share your blood. I love you beyond the fence line. Ray, I pressed that letter against my chest and cried so hard the cats ran out of the room, not because Ray had saved me. By then the law had already turned. But because he had known, he had seen what I had tried not to see, and even from the grave, he had given me permission to choose myself. Lacey and I grew closer after that. She came every Thursday evening when she did not have class. Sometimes we cooked. Sometimes she studied at the kitchen table while I mended old pillowcases or sorted coupons. Sometimes we walked to the edge of the back field, and I told her stories about her grandfather. One evening she said, "Grandma, do you hate Mom?" I looked at the sunset over the walnut trees. "No," I said, "but I do not trust her. Is that enough?" "It has to be." Kimberly wrote me one letter from her attorney's office months later, not a real apology. More of an explanation wearing church shoes. She said she had been overwhelmed. She said Paul pressured her. She said I did not understand how hard it was to be responsible for an aging parent. She said she hoped one day I would see that she had been trying to prevent a crisis. I wrote back one paragraph. Kimberly, a crisis is a storm, a sickness, a fire, or a broken bone. What happened here was a choice. I am willing to speak with you someday if you are willing to tell the truth without blaming my age for your decisions. Until then, please respect my peace. Mom, I did not send it right away. I let it sit on the kitchen table for 2 days. Then I mailed it myself. I walked it all the way into the post office and handed it to Howard Bell. He stamped it in front of me. Certified? He asked gently. I smiled. Yes, I said, certified. He smiled back. After everything, I learned to love my mailbox again. It sounds small, but it mattered. For a while, I was afraid of it. Afraid of what might be missing. Afraid of what had already passed through someone else's hands. Afraid that every empty day meant another secret. But little by little, the mail became mine again. Church bulletins, medical notices, bank statements, Lacey's nursing school acceptance letter, a Christmas card from Ruth Ann with glitter that got all over my table, a seed catalog with tomatoes Ray would have wanted to try. Paper, when it is honest, can be a comfort. The land is still mine. I did not sell it. I did lease 5 acres near the road to a neighbor for hay, because that was my decision and the agreement was fair. Daniel reviewed it. Howard joked that half the town would be scared to hand me a document now, unless it was notarized by God himself. I laughed more easily by then, not the same as before. Betrayal changes the sound of your laugh. But it does not have to kill it. On the first anniversary of the planning meeting, Lacey and I planted a dogwood near the lower pond. Ruth Ann came with lemonade. Howard stopped by after work with a small bag of mail he said was all boring and fully legal. We put Ray's letter in a copy frame and kept the original safe at the bank. Lacey asked what we should call the tree. I said, the certified dogwood. She laughed until she cried and I thought, there it is. Life returning in a small, ridiculous way. Kimberly has not been back to my kitchen. Maybe someday she will sit there again. Maybe she will not. I have stopped building my peace around Mabes. I still keep one chair open at Thanksgiving, but not because I am waiting to be chosen. I keep it open because I refuse to let bitterness arrange my furniture. There is a difference. If she comes one day with truth in her mouth instead of excuses, I will listen. Listening is not the same as handing back the keys. That is something many women my age learn too late. You can love people from behind a locked door. You can forgive someone and still keep your bank statements private. You can pray for your child and still let the court records say what happened. You can be soft-hearted without being easy to erase. The cruelest part of my story was not the land. It was not even the money. It was hearing my own daughter talk about me like I was already gone. Like my wishes were clutter. Like my memories were obstacles. Like my age had made my life available for other people to manage. But the best part was learning that I was still here. My name still mattered. My signature still mattered. My mailbox still mattered. My no still mattered. If you have ever had to stand alone in front of people who should have protected you, I want you to know something. You are not dramatic for remembering what happened. You are not cruel for keeping proof. You are not selfish for choosing peace after years of being used. And if someone keeps telling you that you are confused, difficult, too emotional, or too old to understand your own life, slow down and look for the paper. Look for the missing envelope. Look for the bank record, the deed, the letter, the receipt, the thing they hoped you would never read. Kiat people are not powerless. Sometimes we are just organized. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Tell me if you have ever had to protect something your family thought they had a right to take. And if this story reminded you of someone who always gave too much, send it to her. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, check your mail, and I'll see you in the next story. Bye-bye.